There are 68 teams when you look at the Power Four conferences, ACC, Big 10, Big 12, SEC, and Notre Dame. And I think 21 of the 68 could be favored in 10-plus games. That is insane. We're getting into that right here at YLose. Daily package is $49, weekly $99, monthly $299. I am Lance Taylor with YLose. We're only weeks away from college football. We will continue to give you content right here at YLose, ylose.com/Lance. But we want you to like and subscribe. Make sure you follow us. We're going to have quality picks coming up this college football season, but maybe this gets you on. We gave you some over and under win totals for some teams a couple of weeks ago. Maybe this gets you back in tune with teams you want to play week to week in college football. We're going to start first with Notre Dame. And looking at this schedule, you've got Riley Leonard coming in for Marcus Freeman, best quarterback situation they've had there if Riley Leonard can stay healthy. Week 1 is massive against Texas A&M. Notre Dame just lost their starting left tackle. And that is a problem. You know, you go from Joe Alt to a redshirt freshman. He gets hurt. He's out for the season. You got to replace your right tackle as well. And they go to College Station to take on what I believe is going to be a really underrated Texas A&M squad. If Notre Dame is able to get by that, though, they're going to be 8-0 when they take on Florida State in South Bend. And at that point, I think Notre Dame will be ranked higher than Florida State. Not as high on Florida State as some other people are, but I think Notre Dame would be favored in that spot. And then to close out the Coliseum in the Coliseum, I think at that point USC is not going to be very good. Just my opinion again. I think Notre Dame is at least favored in 10 games. The dog spots, week 1 against A&M, and I'll say maybe Florida State. I feel good that Notre Dame could be favored in 11 games. That's where it starts. Now we will get into conferences. We will go first to the ACC to take a look at a couple of schedules. First schedule we'll look at the Clemson Tigers. So Clemson hasn't won a national championship in a while. And for a moment, they had taken the crown from Alabama as the best program in all of college football. And since Dabo slept a little bit on NIL and the results, they've been solid. They haven't been spectacular, though. They still have a big brand, and I think their numbers still get inflated in Las Vegas. So against Georgia week 1, they're double-digit dogs. Right now it's 14 or 15. I mean, they're a massive dog there. That's not going to change. In Tallahassee on October 5th, I think they're a dog there. Those for sure, they're going to be dogs in those spots. Interesting is going to be, and we'll get to this team in a second, on November 9th when they go to Plattsburgh to take on Virginia Tech. I think Virginia Tech is going to be one of the more improved teams in all of college football. At that point, Clemson could be a dog, depending upon what they've done up until that point. I am going to say right now with the Clemson brand, they're going to be a slight favorite, though. So I think Clemson, as well as Notre Dame, favored in 2 games. Next team we will look at in the ACC, the Miami Hurricanes. Look, there's been a lot of sizzle, but not a lot of substance when you come to Mario Cristobal when it comes to his alma mater in Miami. I mean, the fact of the matter is he's 12-14 in 2 years. Not good enough, not even close. And this thing starts with Florida on the road. That is a huge game for both sides. Billy Napier, obviously on the hottest of hot seats coming into this year, and Mario Cristobal on a hot seat of his own when you look at the money he's making and the collective that is behind this Miami program. They are right now a 2.5-point favorite at Florida. That is a scary as hell game, I believe. It reminds me of Utah 2 years ago, which, by the way, Billy Napier's biggest win to date as the head coach of the Florida Gators was his first ever game against Utah. But they were a slight dog against Utah. They upset the Utes. I could see this happening to Miami, but Miami's going to be favored in that game. The only dog spot they've got, in my opinion, and this is crazy, is maybe at Louisville on October 19th. I think Louisville's going to be solid, a team that played for the ACC last year. Their quarterback situation is going to be maybe better this year. But I think Miami could be a dog at Louisville. I think they're going to be favored at home against Florida State, and then there's no shot they're dogs anywhere else. So that's another one of those teams. I've got 3 teams already as we get into the ACC that will be favored in 10 or more games. Again, ylose.com/Lance. Daily package is $49. The weekly is $99. The monthly is $299. We're going to continue to pump out content for you here at YLose, and we are getting ready for college football. So make sure you jump on board, like, subscribe. We would appreciate that. SMU, coming from the American to the ACC, Rhett Lashley did a tremendous job with quarterback Preston Stone and this program. And I know they're going to be a little devalued because, and I think you get value because I think they will be devalued coming to the ACC. It's a step up from the American. There is no debating that. But I still think SMU is ACC ready right now. And I just want to remind everybody, when Texas A&M went from the Big 12 to the SEC, nobody thought they were ready. Now, they had a quarterback in Johnny Manziel that came out of nowhere. But to end that year, I thought Texas A&M was the second best team in college football back in 2012, in year one in the SEC. With that said, I think SMU can make noise year one in the ACC. When I look at SMU's schedule, they will be favored in the first 4 games. Then they host Florida State. Based on brand, Florida State will be favored there. Then they go to Louisville. They'll be a dog there. That's it. They're only going to be a dog twice. Now, does that, again, equate to SMU winning 10 games, possibly playing in the ACC championship? Possibly. I'm not saying that, though, but I am saying that SMU will be favored in 10 games based on this schedule. So there you go. You've got Clemson, you got Florida State, you got Miami, you got SMU. We've got one more team we're going to take a look at in the ACC that could be favored in 10-plus games. And I know this is hard for people to believe because it looked like Brent Pry was overwhelmed the first season and a half in Blacksburg. And Pry himself said he's going to be disappointed if they don't make a run and play in the ACC championship. When you look at the schedule, at Vanderbilt, Marshall, at Old Dominion, Rutgers, they're going to be favored in all 4. Rutgers could be tricky. They're going to be improved. They're still going to be favored, healthy favorites in those games. Then they go to Miami. They will be a dog in that spot. At Stanford, favorite. Boston College, favorite. Georgia Tech, favorite. At Syracuse, favorite. Clemson at home, I don't know. Let's call it a dog. We did on the other side for Clemson. Then they finish at Duke, Virginia. They'll be favored in those games. So I've got Virginia Tech favored in 10, possibly 11 games, at least the 10-game mark that we're looking at, though. So there you go in the ACC. That is 5 teams plus Notre Dame, who plays that partial ACC schedule. They're all going to be favored, 6 teams in 10-plus games. That is amazing just in one conference right there and Notre Dame. Next, we take a look at the Big 12. In the Big 12, we are going to start first with the Kansas Jayhawks. It's hard to believe this brand is in the mix to possibly win a conference championship and get an automatic bid to the 12-team playoff this year. But when you look, if Jalen Daniels can stay healthy, Lance Leipold is one of the better play callers in all of college football, and it opens up nice. Lindenwood, I don't know who the hell that is, but that's a win, massive favorite. At Illinois could be a little tricky with Brett Bielema there, but they're still going to be favored on the road. Then they get UNLV. Then they go to West Virginia. Okay, at West Virginia, they could be a dog in this spot. Neil Brown and what he did with the 9 wins with the Mountaineers and Garrett Green coming back, one of the big stories last year in the Big 12. I'll say they're dogs in that spot. TCU at home, they're favored. At Arizona State, they're favored. Houston at home, they're favored. In Manhattan against Kansas State, they will be a dog there. Then they've got Iowa State at home. At BYU, should be favored, no problem. Colorado at Baylor. I think Kansas is favored in 10 games and maybe even 11 if they're favored on the road in Morgantown. I'll say they're a dog there, but we'll say Kansas is favored in at least 10 games. Next, we'll take a look at Kansas State. Kansas State's going to be favored in that Sunflower Showdown against Kansas. They've got a tricky out-of-conference John Summerall taking over this Tulane program, but UT Martin, Tulane, Arizona in Manhattan, at BYU, all favored in those games. Oklahoma State and Manhattan favored there. At Colorado favored. At West Virginia, again, maybe I'm buying way too much into Neil Brown and what they did with the 9 wins last year. They could be a dog against West Virginia. And then possibly at Iowa State to end the season. But again, at most, Kansas State's a dog in 2 games. And I think they're favored in 11 as well. So could we have a rematch, Kansas State for the Big 12 championship on an automatic bid? Possibly. Next, we look at Utah. Now, you look at Kyle Whittingham. He is just one of the best coaches in college football that nobody talks about. So consistent year in, year out. Cam Rising coming back for his what seems to be 8th, 9th year. Really hasn't played a lot of football, and that's going to be the big question mark for Utah. Defensively, they're going to be as solid as always. They're going to be able to run the football. But how healthy is Cam Rising? Everybody says he's 100%. If he's 100%, he goes back to the form we saw at the end of 2022. They're going to be just fine. I know Utah will be favored in their first 3 games. Southern Utah, Baylor, Utah State. Then they go to Stillwater. That is a tricky spot. I would say Utah, we'll just call them a dog in Stillwater right now. Arizona at home, favored. Arizona State on the road, favored. TCU, Houston, BYU, Colorado, Iowa State, all favored. Possibly, and I don't think this is going to happen, playing at Central Florida to end the year. If Gus Malzahn develops KJ Jefferson, Possibly the Knights would be favored there, but I think Utah's favored in 11 games. The final team we will take a look at in the Big 12 is Oklahoma State. And the only reason I'm taking a look at them is because they have the possibility of being favored in 10 games. I don't think they will. Week 2 is interesting. They host Arkansas. And I talked about Billy Napier and the hot seat he's on. Sam Pittman is on a hot seat too. And that is one of those swing games that you've got to win before you get into an SEC schedule. I lean Oak State will be a slight favorite in that game. And I'm talking like 1 or 2. It will be right around the pick. Then you've got Utah at home. Again, I think Utah's favored, but maybe they're a dog. Oklahoma State will definitely be a dog in Manhattan. And then moving forward on the schedule, maybe at TCU. I really don't know what to expect with Sonny Dykes in that squad this year. They came out of nowhere 2 years ago with Max Duggan, ended up playing for a national championship. I don't see that type of TCU team, but they could be better than advertised. With all that said, I think Oak State's more favored 9 games, so I'm not even going to count them. I'm going to drop that. I'm going to say 3 teams out of the Big 12 are favored in 10-plus games. Now we run over to the Big 10. And by the way, just want to remind you, YLose.com/Lance. We are doing different podcasts up here. We're getting ready for college football. We're just weeks away from that. Daily package, $49, weekly $99, monthly $299. In the Big 10, we will start first, believe it or not, with the Iowa Hawkeyes. One of the worst offenses we've seen in the history of modern football last year with Iowa. Brian Ferentz is out. I think Iowa's offense can't be any worse. Cade McNamara is going to be healthy. And if they just get a little bit better, you think about 10 wins with how bad that offense was, and you look at this schedule. Now, week 2 in the Cyhawk against Iowa State is always a tricky game. Iowa's going to be favored in that game, though, at home. They go to Minnesota. Iowa's going to be favored there. They go to Columbus. They're obviously going to be a double-digit dog against Ohio State. But I don't know if they're a dog the rest of the way. Washington at home, at Michigan State, Northwestern, Wisconsin at home, at UCLA, at Maryland, against Nebraska at home to end the season. Nebraska is going to be better than advertised. We gave you their team total over earlier this month. I think Iowa's favored in 11 games. They're definitely going to be dogs against Ohio State, but to say that Iowa favored in 11 games is insane. Next, we take a look at Penn State. High expectations for James Franklin. If you're a Penn State fan, you've got to believe this is the year you get to a college football playoff. And when you start to look at the schedule, there's only a possibility that they're underdogs in 3 games. They're already favored against West Virginia week 1. And this really should give me a better gauge on where we have West Virginia. But Penn State is basically a top 10 team right now. So they're favored there. The next spot they could be a dog, possibly the Coliseum on October 12th. So they should cruise the month of September. At USC, potentially a dog. Against Ohio State at home, for sure a dog. And potentially on the road in Madison against Wisconsin. We will see how good Tyler Van Dyke is in that Phil Longo offense. But I am going to say Penn State's only dogs twice. I think they're favored in 10 games. Next, we will take a look at Ohio State and Ohio State. This is interesting because they go to Oregon. And obviously, one of those teams is going to be a dog unless we get a pick. And believe it or not, if they listed that number as a pick right now, it wouldn't absolutely shock me because I think both of those teams are going to be that good. And Ohio State does carry the brand a little bit better. But Ohio State right now, tough game against Iowa at home, but they're going to be favored. At Oregon, I've got a feeling that Oregon might go off as the favorite, but a slight favorite. Ohio State, that's it. They're not going to be dogs against Penn State on the road, and they're not going to be dogs hosting Michigan. So Ohio State, we'll call them a dog in one game, could be favored in every single game. And finally, the team we were talking about that they could possibly be a dog to, the Oregon Ducks. They go to Oregon, taking a look at Oregon's schedule. Interesting out-of-conference games against Boise and in Corvallis in September for the Ducks, but they're going to be favored in all those games. Against Ohio State, possibly a dog in Autzen. Outside of that, at Michigan, possibly. That's it. I mean, Oregon at most is going to be a dog in 2 games. So that is 4 we've got in the Big Ten. And finally, we're going to wrap this up with the SEC. And again, we're talking about teams in college football this year that will be favored in 10-plus games. And to me, that's significant based on this. Again, it doesn't necessarily equate to what that final record's going to be. But if I'm a fan of one of these teams going into the season and I'm favored in 10 games, I believe I should win 10 games. This is one of those cases. My coach is making $8 to $10 million in most of these programs we're talking about. And you shouldn't lose games you're not supposed to. Games you're favored in, to me, you should win. It doesn't always work like that. That's why they play the games and we gamble on the games. We will take first look at Alabama. This is a team that was, I forgot how many years and how many games. It was an insane amount when Alabama went from the 2009 SEC championship as a dog. After that moment, they were favored in seasons. But now Kalen DeBoer takes over this program, and I think it's a little bit different. They've got a tricky game against Wisconsin in September. Definitely be favored in that game. Then they get Georgia and Tuscaloosa. I think a lot of this depends on how Georgia plays against Clemson and on how Alabama plays against both South Florida and Wisconsin before the Georgia game. I will say that Georgia is going to be a slight dog in Bryant-Denny. Again, Nick Saban factor, it mattered. And I think when you look at Las Vegas and where they set some of these numbers, a lot of these were inflated because Nick Saban, not only was he a major factor in just maybe being the greatest coach of all time, but Nick Saban covered a lot. There were some years that he was really, really good against the number. So I'm going to say Georgia, they're a dog at Tennessee, a game they lost 2 years ago, a fantastic down to the wire. Jahmyr Gibbs makes a catch there. Alabama goes on and wins that game, but they lost to Hendon Hooker. We'll see how good Nico is going to be in this Josh Heupel offense. I will say Alabama is going to be favored Tennessee, though. They're going to be favored against the top 10 Missouri. At LSU and at Oklahoma are tricky. I've just got to say, because the Alabama brand, they'll be favored in one of those, and I'm going to say they're favored in 10 games this year. They could be underdogs in 4 games, which is insane if you know the history of Alabama football against the number with Nick Saban. It was just crazy how many games consecutively, and I would love to see from that too, and I can find this out, and we'll relay it at some point, from the 2009 SEC championship game through Nick Saban's final game against Michigan in the Rose Bowl, how many they were favored in. But I will say Alabama and that brand will still be favored in 10 plus. Take a look at Georgia. We can breeze through Georgia because Georgia is going to be favored more than likely in every game this year. But here's an interesting thing to look at in Georgia's schedule. We saw the coaches' preseason poll. They play 3 preseason top 6 teams on the road in Texas, Alabama, and Ohio State. So Georgia's favored against Clemson. We know that. At Alabama, they could be a dog. I don't think they will. At Texas, could be a dog. I don't think they will. At Ole Miss, there is no way they would disrespect Georgia like that. We've seen that matchup before. So I think Georgia, worst case, is a dog in 2 spots. I actually think they're going to be favored at Alabama, at Texas, and at Ole Miss. So we've got 2 in the SEC. We've got a lot to look at in the SEC. There's a lot of possibilities here. LSU, another one. Year 3, Brian Kelly. If I'm an LSU fan, this is where we have to make our mark, and we've got to go back to the college football playoff. Now, they start first with USC right now. They're listed as a 6-point favorite. They're definitely going to be favored there. Ole Miss are going to be favored. Great game last year. Track meet there. At A&M is an interesting spot. Hosting Alabama is an interesting spot. And then possibly Oklahoma coming to Tiger Stadium. I think they'll be favored against Oklahoma. They could be favored in every one of their games. I think they're going to be a favorite in 10 games, though. I'll say they're dogs against A&M and Alabama. So LSU is going to join us on that list. Next team we're going to look at out of the SEC is Missouri. Missouri has got one of the more beneficial schedules for a team really trying to crack through and get to a college football playoff. They're going to be favored in their first 4 games. Then they go to College Station. That's when shit gets real for Missouri. If they beat A&M, they at that point will be 6-0 hosting Auburn. I think they beat Auburn. That's 7-0. They're going to be favored in that game if they beat A&M. At Alabama, definitely a dog. Oklahoma at home, possibly a dog. So you got 2 dog. You got 1 dog situation for sure against Alabama, and then possibly at A&M and Oklahoma at home. I will say they're favored against Oklahoma. So I think Missouri is going to be favored in 10 games. They join our list. Ole Miss is the team we look at next. Now, when we talk about beneficial schedules, Ole Miss fans coming off the most wins in program history with 11 last year under Lane Kiffin. This is the year they've got to break through. They are definitely going to be favored in their first 6 games, and then it gets real when they go to Baton Rouge to take on LSU. I think there will be a slight dog there. They host Oklahoma. They'll be favored. At Arkansas, favored. Georgia at home, dog. At Florida, favored. Mississippi State at home, dog. Favorite. So they're favored in 10 of 12 games. Next, we take a look at Tennessee. Tennessee, interesting to me because, again, Joe Milton won 9 games, and he was very average in my opinion. He's on an NFL roster right now with the New England Patriots, but they're going to get an upgrade in Nico, the true freshman. We saw him in the bowl game against a really good Iowa defense last year, and he looked fantastic. The moment did not look too big, and there's a reason that people said that they paid him $5 or $6 million in NIL dollars to come to Knoxville. They will be favored. Tricky second week against NC State, a very good Wolfpack team, but they're going to be favored. They're definitely in Charlotte. So they will open 3-0. They go to Oklahoma. Their dogs there. At Arkansas, favorite. Florida at home, favored. Alabama at home, I think they're a dog. Second. Then they go to Georgia November 16th. I'm going to say Tennessee's a dog in 3 spots, so we're going to take them off the list. We will take a look at Texas A&M, though. The Aggies' first year under Mike Elko. I think this is one of the surprise teams in all of college football. It starts week 1, though. They get past Notre Dame, and I think they're going to be favored in that game. Then they will open the season at 5-0 hosting Missouri. I think they get to 6-0. They'll be favored there. At Mississippi State, 7-0. LSU, at that point, if they're 7-0, they will be favored there. 8-0. At South Carolina, 9-0. New Mexico State, 10-0. Again, this is just projection, just playing the schedule out. At Auburn, tricky game. They would be favored in that spot if they were 10-0. And then they play Texas, and everybody can't wait for November 30th in that game. I'm going to say A&M's favored in 10 games. They're going to join our list. And the final team we will take a look at are the Texas Longhorns, year 1 in the SEC. They're coming in. They believe that they're already going to own this league in year 1. They go to Michigan week 2. Now, the Michigan's going to have this going for them. They're going to be on a 16-game win streak. It's in the big house. It's the big noon Fox kickoff. I think Texas is still going to be a slight favorite there. Texas, Oklahoma, neutral site. That's a revenge game. Dylan Gabriel beat them last year, but Texas will be favored there. They host Georgia, could be favored. I'll say they're a slight dog. And then at A&M could be a slight dog there. So Texas could actually be a dog in 3 games. I think they could be a favorite in 11 games, though. I'll say they get favored in 10 games. So our count there is we've got 7 out of the SEC, 3 out of the Big 12. We've got 3 in the Big 10, or we called it 4. We'll call it 4 in the Big 10. And then we had 5 in the ACC and Notre Dame. So our final count, 20 of the 68 teams favored in 10 or more games. That is amazing when you think about it. Again, YLose.com/Lance. Like and subscribe. We would appreciate that. We're going to give you great picks all football season. Can't wait to slay the college game this year. Daily package $49, weekly $99, monthly $2.99. YLose.com/Lance. You guys like and subscribe. We would really, really appreciate that.